Once you have your design drawn in your sketchbook, you are going to make sure that you've met the criteria that you at least have a border or that all four sides have been touched on the block. You're going to raise your hand and get approval from me to be able to trace your design on the paper. You want to make sure that you push down really hard so that you've got a nice pencil drawing that will transfer to this tracing paper, because this is what we're going to transfer onto the block. When you get your block, please unwrap it carefully. Throw both of these pieces away in the garbage. Take your design, turn it face down, line it up, and then using a pencil, I'm using a drafting pencil. You can also just use a regular pencil. You're going to push by coloring over your whole design, just on the places where you have drawn. And that is transferring the image to your block. So I'm just gonna make sure I hold it down. Okay, so you're going to transfer your whole image this way. If there's any places that you need to fix it up, you can always just go back and color them in. Now that I have transferred my drawing to the block with pencil, I'm going to go over my drawing again with Sharpie. These Sharpies are going to be by the sink as well. Everything you need for this project will be by the sink. The reason I'm going over it with Sharpie is so that I can make my lines a little bit thicker, because if the lines are thicker, it's going to be easier for me to cut them with the tools. So sometimes a Sharpie will get gummed up, which means it won't draw very well on this surface. So if that happens, you can just take your Sharpie, kind of scribble on the edge of the paper here. That will clear it off so that you're able to draw over all of your lines. Now it's time to start carving. Over on the same place where everything else is, you will find the carving tools. There's a whole box of them, and they're kind of organized by size, with the blue being the smallest gouge and the lime green being the widest gouge. The gouges that look like a V are going to be the ones that you use for carving lines, and then the larger gouges, the yellow and the green, are going to be for carving out large areas like of negative space that I don't want to keep. Some things that you need to keep in mind with these gouges: they are super sharp, and we want them that way so they'll do a nice job cutting the block, not tearing it. And because of that, there's some safety issues. If you carve your block and your hand is in front of it and it accidentally slips, you will cut yourself. You will create a huge puncture wound on your hand. So you at no time are allowed to have your hand in front of the block or be carving towards your hand. You also don't want to be carving towards yourself. If I'm standing here or sitting here and I'm facing this and it slips, I could poke myself, and that's very unsafe. So I will come by and yell at you when you are using your tools incorrectly. Don't be offended, it's just because I love you. Do not carve towards your hand, do not carve towards your body. Then how do I carve, Mrs. Snyder? So how you're going to carve is away from your hand, or in the direction that goes opposite of your hand. So my advice would be for all of you to start with the blue tool first, and to start going along the spaces that you know you're going to be carving out of. And for me, it's easier to hold the tool kind of up here at the top so I can control it really well. And I'm going to just go around the borders or the edges where I know that I'm going to be eliminating a large space. Guys, keep track of all these things because you're responsible for cleaning them all up. So I'm just going to make sure that I go around the border of what I want to get rid of, so that I have that nice line first. Notice that instead of carving towards myself here, I rotated the block so I can move the block as I'm carving. You do not need to cut very deep in order to get a little bit of relief there. So you don't want to carve too deeply, or else you will rip your block and you don't get another one. Now that I've cleared out this space, if I know I want to remove the rest of it, then that negative space behind, you can look at these tools here. Looks like the green, maybe the yellow's a little bit bigger. I can decide it's probably best to go one direction. So remember, I'm going to hold my hand here. I'm going to move the block. I'm almost going at, like, see how the block is, or the tool is laying really flat against the surface? I'm not going like this with my tool, because all that does is carve too deeply inside. So it's like the tool is kind of pushing along, just like it was skating along the edge of the surface like a sled or a slide. So I'm going along the edge and carefully moving my pieces. If I needed to get a section that was kind of curved, I could turn my block, move it away from my fingers in order to carve out these sections. Go slowly, don't go too deeply. If you go too deeply, you will break your block. I'm trying to stay inside the areas that you want to eliminate. When you're ready to carve out the lines of your design, I would switch to the blue or the light red, which are the smallest tools. And if I'm going to be carving away on all of these lines, remember I'm carving away from my fingers, and I'm eliminating this black because I know that was a space that I wanted to include as a detail. Notice that I'm rotating my block. I'm not carving down towards my hand. I'm always making sure that my fingers are out of the way in case my block were to slip. Always rotating it away from me. Okay, you can kind of see I got the design there, and then I can move. So I can even rotate the block while I'm moving to get my lines to curve. However far you get that day, you're going to make sure that you use one of these tools, which is also over by the sink, to make your little shavings get into a pile. Put it in your hand. If you get some on the floor, we do have a broom and a dustpan. Make sure that you put your tools back in the correct spot. And I would love it for your name to be on your block and your teacher's name so that we can keep them together.